ensure regional cooperation and South-South experience sharing to improve women's abilities to disseminate their voices, needs, and knowledge. 4, establish a gender-sensitive financing and resource mobilization mechanism which includes gender-specific budgeting within the UNCCD. 4, finally, promote involvement of women in research institutions to make sure their knowledge production and sharing is fostered. We envision a world that is inclusive, kind, and nurturing, and the only way forward is to recognize and combat the injustice prevalent in our world today. Thank you, President.
Thank you, civil society. Please, distinguished delegate from Venezuela, have the floor.
Saludos, buenos días, señor delegado, miembros de las mesas, recién fraternidad.
The interpreter apologizes, but the quality of the sound is not sufficient to allow for interpretation. We have the impression that there are too many microphones on at once.
Al igual que la Secretaría de la Competición o la Organización Inicialmente saludamos el debate del tema de género. En este sentido quisiéramos recomendar que se solicite un apoyo, que se apoye a las partes en la consecución de las acciones como la.
Again, we repeat, the quality of the sound is not sufficient to allow for simultaneous interpretation. There's also a lot of feedback. Is it possible for the Venezuela to be switched to a different microphone?
De los y las jóvenes. Queremos tener como ejemplo en nuestro país, contamos con la misión Árbol, que incorpora distintos sectores, entre ellos mujeres, jóvenes y niñas, desde el año 2006.
Sorry, estimate delegate, please change the microphone, please, for the interpretation. Please change the microphone.
Sí, gracias.
Please start for the beginning.
Sí,
Thank you.
se oye.
Can you hear me now?
Inicio nuevamente
I will resume from the beginning my statement. I'd like to preface my remarks by bidding a good afternoon to the distinguished delegate and members of the Bureau and to convey to you the warm fraternal greetings of your fellow people of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We wish to weigh in on this point, beginning by thanking the government of Côte d'Ivoire for their very generous hospitality. Our thanks also go to the Secretariat of the Convention for the organization of this meeting of the Committee of the Whole. We hail this initiative to carve out space to hold a discussion on gender. On the issue of gender, we recommend that state parties be supported in the implementation of land governance and forestry actions and ensure that such actions and programs have a gender perspective and also make space for the active participation of young people. I would like to share with you an example of such practices in Venezuela, Mission Tree, or Mission Trees, Mission Árbol, which is a strategy which has specific action points that puts front and center women and girls from the age of 16 years. In 2021, as of 2021, we've been promoting a program called the Tree Guardians in places of education, with a particular focus on bringing young people on board. We also have community grassroots programs that center young people as workers for climate change in the climate change brigades. We have the Sowing Life brigade as well, and we also have the One Student, One Tree program. We make sure that women, and young women in particular, are key parts of all of these issues. We also have the eco-body system, which is intended to promote tourism in urban and rural areas and to promote reforestation and to encourage ecotourism that participates in these women-led reforestation programs. We also have a national program for a national body for gender protection, and that is responsible for actions such as the establishment of the Women's Credit Bank, the Unit for Women's Affairs, and the Directorate of Women. In the specific context of this convention and issues such as migration, we include women in programs such as the I Am Woman program, which is a socioeconomic production program, and it covers areas such as fisheries and agriculture and coffee growing, making opportunities for women and women's leadership. We'd like to wrap up by making it clear that we are a feminist country with high respect for gender equality. Thank you.
I thank you all for your statements. I now give the floor to the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat to respond to the question and comment from the floor. Mr. Aydara, you have the floor, please. Subtarabian, please have the floor.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس على
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. We in Saudi Arabia, we welcome the report submitted by the Secretariat concerning the gender mainstreaming. We do endorse all the strategies related to these goals. As far as women empowerment is concerned, we in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we are giving women a leading role in land tenure in order to achieve full equality between men and women. Furthermore, we try to achieve welfare and equality. In our plan, Vision 2030, we try to achieve sustainability. We have submitted a proposal, an initiative in the G20 meeting to that effect. According to our 2030 vision paper, we focus on the promotion of the economic and social status of women. We also aim at increasing the role of women in all spheres and sectors. We want to secure women's rights in all activities. Women are active in economic and political activities. Women are represented in the Shura Council, in the municipality councils, and in many positions in companies, in banks, and in many institutions. Therefore, for all these reasons, we do endorse the recommendations enshrined in this document, and we are adamant on securing the support for women in all sectors.
Yes, please, Mexico, have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving us the floor once again. Mexico fully supports and endorses the decisions taken on the implementation of the Gender Action Plan, and we very much welcome the inclusion of gender in national reports. We would like to emphasize the point that we have a feminist foreign policy approach in Mexico, and thanks to the leadership of our Subsecretariat and Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs, which is led by a woman and a largely female team, we have been working hard on gender perspective under the UNFCCC on a climate action plan for women and gender. In the climate technology network, we also have spaces for young people and indigenous people, as well as specific fora and representation spaces for women. It's important for us that we have women represented at all levels in our actions. At the national level, we ensure that women are included in all consultations on public policy. Recently, supporting the Women's Caucus and the Women's CBD under the CBD Convention, we supported the inclusion of an additional target on gender as part of the Biodiversity 2020 initiative. And it's related only to women, not a broader gender targeted. We're also part of the Iguazu initiative to ensure the participation and justice for environment defenders, including female environmental defenders. Mexico welcomes the fact that the upcoming sessions of the General Assembly on Gender will take place, and we highlight the key role played by women, including young women and girls, in all of their diversity, and the fact that they are at the forefront of actions to tackle desertification, land degradation, and drought. We are seeking to set aside the discrimination and violence that women are faced with and to overcome all of that. In order to do so, we need to strengthen the gender equality and human rights and the approach and the human rights for women approach, and make sure that that's cross-cutting in across all areas of society, including in our agriculture and rural development and environmental policies. That holds true for our country. And this is particularly true for land tenure issues. We have a whole raft of programs to ensure that we contribute to the well-being of women and ensure that their rights are returned to them, particularly for women living in rural areas or women who hail from indigenous communities. We have, for example, eliminated the requirement that somebody be a landowner or a homeowner in order to have access to key programs. In particular, the interpreter apologizes, but there is another microphone on somewhere and there is somebody else speaking simultaneously. It's difficult to make out what Mexico is saying. We therefore support the inclusion of the agenda item land tenure, land ownership in the agenda of the COP15. We have robust institutions in Mexico in order to make sure that land rights are made valid and actually have effect, in order to give certainty to landowners and those who have land tenure, both men and women alike, so that they can properly make use of their land and they can do so in security, knowing that it will not be taken away from them and that it will be preserved for them. We support cooperation. We support actions such as accreditation systems that would accredit the fact that women are landowners in their own right and are recognized as such. We respect the customs of local populations and indigenous peoples, but we do so making sure that they are in line with human rights, including women's rights. We support the point made by the delegation of Argentina with regard to capacity building and awareness raising. We would like to share with you that we have identified the fact that there is greater acceptance of indigenous communities and other communities in society where they're included in the design of such programs, particularly when we involve fathers, husbands and sons in pro-women and gender-sensitive issues, because that gives us an opportunity to make it clear to them why it's such an important step and how it redounds to benefit of them as well. We think it's important to make sure that the gender is therefore a key perspective that's cross-cutting across all of our actions under the implementation of this convention, including at their grassroots level. And we also need to see the ecosystem as a holistic whole. The way that we approach our ecosystem and the way we make sure that gender cross-cutting will have a knock-on effect on our actions under all three Rio Conventions. We think that women are key in order to make in carbon capture actions, in actions to root out invasive species, and in actions to conserve water, as well as other climate and environmentally friendly actions, because they are the guardians of our climate environment. They're familiar with it. They live with it day in, day out in a very symbiotic relationship. And it's for that reason, given that key knowledge, that they should not be left behind. No one man or woman alike should be left behind. Thank you. Thank you, says the Chair. I give the floor to the representative of UNCCD Secretariat.
To the question and comments from the floor. Please, Aidana, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat would like to thank the delegates for their positive comments and active contribution to all initiatives relating to the implementation of the Gender Action Plan. All your points have been noted thoroughly. I would like probably to just confirm that the Secretariat and the GM will continue collaborating with the parties, the Gender Caucus, as well as partners to accelerate progress on the implementation of the Gender Action Plan with specific measures to track progress as requested. Furthermore, activities will be implemented to communicate on this action plan on the roadmap, as well as to raise awareness on critical issues relating to women's land rights and other topics as mentioned during the meeting. We thank you very much.
Thank you, Aidara. I recognize the flag from Madagascar. Please have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chair. I represent Madagascar, as you've just pointed out, and I am from the Ministry for the Environment and Sustainable Development. We'd like to hail the efforts spearheaded by the Secretariat, all the hard work that's gone into the report that you've just shared with us. Madagascar is one of those countries most exposed to the adverse impacts of climate change, particularly in the southern part of our country, and women bear the brunt of the drought and desertification that we're experiencing, particularly in the southern part of our country. And that process of desertification has accelerated over the last 3 years, which is a key point I need to make. In 2021, Madagascar, through the Ministry of the Environment and Sustainable Development, launched its Green Belt project to cover the southern part of the country, but other regions as well, a key project for the restoration and implementation of a climate change resilient environment, an environment that is also resilient to drought. The project also seeks to restore degraded land. Women, as I said, bear the brunt of drought. They're not free to move away from the regions affected by drought as men are. Men often migrate to make a living, to earn money, but they leave behind the women and the children. They remain victims, therefore, of the harsh environment caused by the drought and desertification. They have to live day in, day out with all the problems that occur as a result of living on such arid land. The project for the implementation of a green belt is therefore very strongly focused on ensuring benefits for women, particularly the cash forward principle that is part of that Green Belt initiative, which paves the way for direct cash payments or cash transfers. Said program is designed to lend support in particular to families. And it makes sure that a cash transfer is made to the person responsible for providing for the well-being of the family. The intent is to make sure that this is a long-term program. It requires considerable financial input. It requires a great deal of funding, and we would therefore welcome the support of the Secretariat to find streams of financing through the UNCCD channels to make sure that we can finance this program, as well as financing under the global mechanism, again, to help us fund this program and others. We believe that awareness raising on land ownership and access rights is key, particularly for women, to give them a moral boost, particularly the fact that they now have to shoulder a key responsibility when it comes to restoring previously degraded land, particularly women in the south of Madagascar. Circling back to the earlier point I made. Thank you.
Madagascar. There are no more speakers on my list under this issue. Switzerland, please have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to having organized all the event. We also appreciate and wish to present our thanks to the government of Ivory Coast for hosting the COP this year. I wanted to, first of all, in the name of Switzerland, we would like to mention the appreciation for the tremendous growth and of the consideration of gender within the UNCCD and by the parties. We have heard a lot of very inspiring examples of how this has moved extremely quickly with all the activities which have been developed. We fully also support the Gender Action Plan developed and wish to thank the Secretariat for the work done. We would also like to highlight the very favorable collaboration within the different tools and partners, notably the World Overview of Conservation Approaches and Technologies, FOCAT, We would like to add 2 additional requests or suggestions. We join here the CSO panel in the demand that this gender equality, gender balance is also respected within the SPI and the different subsidiary bodies. And we would also encourage to try to search further synergies or options, opportunities of collaboration with the other Rio conventions which have developed their own tools for gender action plan and gender consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. There are no more speakers on my list under this issue. I now invite the committee to turn its attention to the issue of sand and dust storms. The committee has before it document ICCD/COP15/16, and ICCD/COP15/21. I now give the floor to the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat to introduce the document ICCD/COP15/16. Mr. Yu Chan Kan, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, distinguished delegates. Document ICCD/COP15/16 provides a summary of the activities undertaken by the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism on Sand and Dust Storms, in short, SDS, as requested in Decision 25/COP13. It represents conclusions and recommendations on ways and the means to strengthen capacity and ongoing efforts in addressing the negative impact of SDS, including anthropogenic source management. Regarding the efforts of the Secretariat and the GM on SDS, we would like to highlight a few contained in the document. 1, the Secretariat finalized and published the Sand and Dust Storms Compendium, information and guidance on assessing and addressing the risks in collaboration with numerous UN entities and partners. The compendium brings together information and guidance from a wide range of sources, including strategies, approaches, and methodology frameworks on data collection, assessment, monitoring and early warning, impact mitigation, and preparedness, source mapping, and anthropogenic source mitigation. 2, the Secretariat has been developing the SDS toolbox, including the global SDS source base map, in collaboration with FAO, UNDP, UNDRL, UNEP, UNESCOP, UNESCO, WMO, and VOCAT, and external experts. As a complement to the asset compendium, the SDS toolbox aims to provide stakeholders with the easy access to tools, methodologies, approaches, case studies, and other resources to assist the parties with the development and implementation of the asset policies and plans at various levels. 3, the Secretariat has also been developing a set of capacity building materials in line with the asset compendium and the toolbox. The training and the supporting materials are targeted at individuals responsible for SDS issues, including UNCCD National Focal Point. Last month, a training was organized in Saudi Arabia to support capacity building of relevant experts working on SDS. 4, the Secretariat has been assisting in the development of national and regional plans, policy, and frameworks in line with the principles presented in the UNCCD Policy Advocacy Framework on SDS. Several pilot projects have been implemented and initiated with partners at national and regional levels in Nigeria, Central Asia, and Northeast Asia. 5, the Secretariat and the GM have been working closely with the United Nations Coalition on combating SDS in conceptualizing a global implementation program for combating SDS to enhance food security and achieve LDN, land direction neutrality. A draft concept note has been developed, which builds on the ongoing SDS-related activities of the UNCCD and FAO. More details on this program concept will be presented at the SDS Day event scheduled for 16th May in the Rio Convention Pavilion. 6. Finally, the Secretariat has been developing, in collaboration with FAO, voluntary policy guidelines in order to assist affected countries with the integration of SDS into related policy and development agenda, including LDN. Draft elements of these guidelines are presented in document ICCD/COP15/CLP2. Looking ahead, document ICCD/COP15/16 outlines recommendations on future work priorities to promote and strengthen capacity development for the affected parties in addressing SDS, including addressing data and knowledge gaps identified through a survey conducted with national focal points. This includes the need for 1. Policy science interface or dialogue on SDS. 2. A global and scientific cooperation initiative on SDS. 3. A global network on SDS information and knowledge. 4. Regional cooperation and implementation mechanisms. 5. Training and knowledge sharing. Draft elements for a decision on SDS are contained in document ICCD/COP15/21 for the consideration of the parties. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, for your statement. I now open the floor for any statement in connection with the report that was just introduced. Speaker, I request to keep statements brief and concise so that I can give the floor to as many speakers as possible. I will take all comments and then give the floor to the Secretariat to respond. Iraq, please have the floor.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity to speak. First of all, I would like to say a few words in French and say in my own name and on behalf of my country how grateful we are to the government and good people of La Côte d'Ivoire for the warm hospitality afforded us. And I'd also like to thank the UNCCD Secretariat and all the organizers for their efforts to hold this conference successfully.
أيها المندوبون الموقرون، إن بلد العراق واجه الكثير من التحديات والأزمات والحروب، وآخرها حربه ضد تنظيم داعش الإرهابي الذي استنزف
Chair, we seem to have a technical problem. Could the speaker start again, please?
النزاعات المسلحة والتفجيرات الإرهابية إلى دمار النظم البيئية، حيث قطعت الكثير من الأشجار ودمرت الغابات والحقول.
Sorry, Mr. Delegate, please. We have a problem, a technical problem with the translation. Please start again. Can you start again, please?
Yes, please. Yes.
Thank you.
سيداتي سادتي أيها المندوبون الموقرون.
Chair, distinguished delegates, my country, Iraq, has had to face a number of challenges, wars and crises, particularly the war against the terrorist group Daesh, which has depleted our natural and human resources. Armed conflict as well as terrorist movements have affected our natural infrastructure. Forests have been depleted, as has grazing land and irrigation projects, which has all compounded the problem of desertification. This is borne out by the increasing risk of drought in Iraq, especially with the river Sawa drying up, and that drew its water from the water table. And the drop in rainfall and the groundwater levels has forced many farmers to change jobs, and that has led to the problem of urban drift. And then there's another problem which has arisen, which is sand and dust storms. as a consequence of desertification and drought because of the problems particularly affecting Baghdad. And this has led to catastrophic problems, especially for people with pulmonary disease, and also road accidents have increased because of poor visibility. And the activity of our airport has had to be interrupted several times. A number of weather experts in Iraq forecast and forewarn of problems if measures are not taken. And they're talking about a tenfold increase in such storms over the next 20 years if nothing is done. And this threatens our health and security, which is why we need to find solutions as soon as possible in order to address this risk. There's a need for technology transfer and knowledge exchange and improvement of expertise at all levels, especially from regional and international bodies, in order to combat this common enemy. Chair, we support the United Nations decade for 2021-2030 on the restoration of ecosystems. Indeed, our ecosystem is facing many difficulties, especially after the drying up of our two main rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. And Iraq is very seriously addressing the issue of desertification and dust storms, which is why we are counting on international assistance to restore our ecosystems. We also support the United Nations Decade 2018-2027 to eradicate poverty. And one can only eradicate poverty if you guaranteed food security for all, which is why it's essential to help those in need so that energy and resources can be exploited rationally, to put an end to land degradation and to strengthen the position of small farmers so that they can guarantee their own food security through a process of economic recovery that will benefit all. Thank you.
Okay, please, Algeria, have the floor.
C'est OK? D'accord. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. As this is my first statement, on behalf of the Africa Group, I would like to begin by congratulating you on your chairmanship of the meeting and also express our deep gratitude to the government and good people of La Côte d'Ivoire for the warm hospitality extended to us since our arrival here in this beautiful city of Abidjan. The cornerstone of our land, of our lives, is land, because it is the source of our food, prosperity, stability, and peace. Many environmental problems cause land degradation, including sand and dust storms, which at the same time are deemed to be causes and consequences. They're a cause because these sandstorms come from shifting sand dunes, and they're a consequence because of the degradation of land caused by man-made actions compounded by drought, water erosion, and wind erosion. In this context, the Africa region has taken note of the report submitted by the Secretariat, requested by the COP in accordance with Decision 25 COP14, on the conclusions and recommendations on ways and means of strengthening capacity, as well as measures currently being taken to address the damaging effects of sand and dust storms, including management of sources. Chair, establishing a non-binding guiding principle to help to integrate sand and dust storms in key action areas will make it possible to mobilize national and international funding to reduce the harmful effects economically and environmentally of these dust storms in the affected areas. Furthermore, a global map of sources with geographical information system tools accompanied by a capacity building program would be a roadmap for urgent decision-making in order to draw up action plans through intervention priorities. The Africa Group supports the idea that the global mechanism should continue to support states parties in developing transformative projects on desertification, land degradation, and drought, as well as prevention and risk management programs. And I would conclude by saying that land degradation is a result of poor management compounded by drought, and it's a problem to be taken seriously. Chair, distinguished delegates, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, esteemed delegate. Please, Korea, have the floor.
Microphone, please.
Please press the button, please. Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I will restart. I have the honor to speak. Thank you, Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Republic of Korea. First of all, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to the warm welcome and hospitality of the Côte d'Ivoire government, as well as the people of Côte d'Ivoire. Each spring, sand and dust storms hit the Republic of Korea. Sand and dust storms is a major cause of fine dust and a transboundary environmental issue. The Korean people experience the adverse effects of sand and dust storms each year. Among others, sand and dust storms combined with other harmful pollutants, including vehicle fumes, threaten people's health. To combat land degradation and sand and dust storms in Northeast Asia, the Republic of Korea and its neighboring countries jointly established Desertification, Land Degradation, and Drought Northeast Asia Network, or DLDD, and EAN. The network holds an annual steering committee meeting and forum and implements a Greening Drylands Partnership Project in Zaminut, Mongolia. Also, recognizing the importance of mitigating sand and dust storm sources, the Republic of Korea and Mongolia have worked together to implement a bilateral forestry cooperation project to combat desertification since 2007. We also collaborated with the civil society organization to create planted forests in the Kubuchi Desert in China. For this reason, we are keenly aware of the importance of global sand and dust storm policies, and we are supporting the development of global sand and dust storm policies through the Changwon Initiative. Sand and dust storms are closely linked to desertification, and their impacts are causing economic, environmental, and health issues. In order to resolve sand and dust storm issues, cross-border collaboration is essential. In this regard, the UNCCD Secretariat can play an important role, especially in identifying drivers of sand and dust storms and develop various tools and platforms to resolve this issue. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Please, Syria, have the floor.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أود أن أهنئك في البداية على السلام.
Thank you, Chair. May I begin by congratulating you on your election to chair the conference. The Syrian Arab Republic is severely affected by sand and dust storms. This is one of the most serious phenomena afflicting the Arab world, and it requires special attention so that we can remedy its adverse effects. Indeed, these storms are a cross-border issue in our region. For example, the sandstorms, which reached Europe and the Alps on the 6th and 7th of February of this year. That provides a graphic example And that storm affected the Mediterranean region on the 8th of February, and it meant very serious effects for transport, ecosystems, and the environment. Likewise, in September 2015, a very serious sandstorm lasted 8 days, and it affected the Arab world, and the Mediterranean from the Sinai Desert to the south of Turkey, and even reached the north of Iran. These storms produced a large death toll amongst asthmatic people, particularly in Lebanon, Syria, and in Iraq. And I'd like to recall the summary in the annex of the document regarding the action plan with respect to related activities, particularly point 3, action plan element 3 on exchange of information and capacity building. I'd also highlight 4, action plan element 4, development of a platform for sand and dust storms, as well as action plan element 5, fundraising and resource mobilization. In 2014, in Syria, in conjunction with the UNEP, we had launched a regional project to combat dust storms, and it was a project which brought together Turkey, Iran, Jordan, and Syria. However, that project was never funded. And since this is a transboundary issue, as I said, these sand and dust storms must be duly addressed, and they should be the subject of regional cooperation projects. Furthermore, in Europe, we've launched a project to combat drought in cooperation with the Secretariat of the Convention, and this project includes identification of the sources of the phenomena of such storms and ways of mitigating them. And we hope to secure funding so that we can actually carry out these projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for giving the floor again to India. Sand and dust storms, in short SDS, they are of common occurrence in arid and semi-arid regions of both Asia and Africa, and they affect as many as 11 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations. SDS adversely affect environment and quality of life. India highly appreciates that United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, that is ESCAPE, is supporting regional cooperation for issues related to SDS. Mr. Chairman, Decision 25 of COP14 requested UNCCD to finalize and publish Sand and Dust Storms Compendium to provide information and guidance on assessing and addressing the risk related to SDS. The compendium has been finalized, although it is not in the public domain for access. India fully acknowledges and supports that UNCCD Secretariat has been assisting countries in regional planning and policy framework on combating SDS. Several pilot projects were implemented in Central and Northeast Asia, including China, Korea, and Russia, to formulate a national SDS plans. In India, working on monitoring of SDS is primarily done by Indian Meteorological Department. ICCD COP15/16 para 23 highlights about major gaps in monitoring, risk assessment, impact assessment, and emergency response measures while addressing issues related to SDS. Anthropogenic SDS source mitigation is lacking in most of the countries, and there is a lack of required data and information to address SDS-related issues. The capacity building of parties to address SDS through toolbox and decision support system was envisaged. The first SDS toolbox will be made available by mid-2022. Usually, these toolbox provide methodology to investigate available information in a scientific way, to address envisaged problems at a coarser scale. India can designate appropriate remote sensing agencies such as SEC and NRSC to develop GIS layers at a finer scale, to integrate indicator layers to test its applicability on ground for further improvement. This would address the issues in a more pragmatic way. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, once again for giving the opportunity.
Thank you, Semi Delegate. Please, European, have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the European Union and its member states, we wish to acknowledge the importance of this issue of sand and dust storms and their intensity, frequency, and adverse impact on the economy and the provision of essential ecosystem services and the health impacts of this phenomenon. We welcome the active commitment of the Secretariat within its mandate to the UN Coalition on Combating Sand and Dust Storms. We also welcome the efforts made by the Convention to address the adverse effects of sand and dust storms, and we particularly appreciate cooperation with UNEP and the IOM with the support of experts in the science policy interface, which have made it possible to fine-tune the map of sources of sand and dust storms, and we support the continuation of such cooperation in future. The EU welcomes the development of the toolbox, as well as the compendium of available technologies, and we encourage their use and broad dissemination amongst stakeholders. In any event, the European Union and its member states are ready to support the capacity building of countries so they can use these tools. Cooperation should continue with other UN specialized agencies and the Rio Conventions and the UN Coalition for combating sand and dust storms. We also need to participate in the development of a global initiative to deal with this issue in order to attack the anthropogenic sources and shortfalls in data and information. And we think the role of the convention should be to focus on mitigation measures, source mitigation measures, such as promoting sustainable land management, combating desertification, and combating land degradation, as well as impact management. We also need to take into account the regional and sub-regional nature of impact and pay special attention to the participation of women, youth, and other vulnerable groups. Lastly, the European Union and its member states feels that the framework and existing initiatives may make it possible to achieve our objectives, but only if the shortcomings are identified in the coordination mechanisms, and we should endeavor to strengthen existing tools to that end. Thank you.
Please, China, have the floor.
Thank you, 主席。中方认为议题结论符合中方大规模开展沙尘源治理的工作实际，赞同通过国际合作减少沙尘暴，特别是跨境沙尘暴的危害。中方认为沙尘暴防治。
Chair, we have a technical problem with the interpretation. Could the speaker please start again?
加强尘源地和沙尘暴路径区的治理，同时明确预报预警。
China, please. The translator, please start again, please.
OK. 中方认为议题结论符合中方大规模开展沙尘源治理的工作实际，赞同通过国际合作。
Source, and we agreed that international cooperation will minimize the hazard of the sandstorm, especially the transboundary ones. In our view, the core of addressing the issue is to plant trees and grass and address the source and root of sandstorm. and have a clear division of labor in the forecast and early warning and emergency response, and enhance the close protection of degraded land so as to minimize the damage to the vegetation in the sand areas. Compared with 2006 and 2010, in 2016 and 2020, our sandstorm has been reduced by 29%. This is the result of our efforts I mentioned above. We'd like to enhance international cooperation in addressing the sandstorm to inform synergy. Thank you.
The floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Seremos.
Thank you, Chair. We will be brief and respond to your kind request. I speak on behalf of Mexico. Mexico believes it is important that we include the type of initiatives that can resolve the problem of dust and sandstorms. Regionally, nationally as well, they must be seen through a broad lens, such as matters of public health. There have been programs developed for this to conserve lands in livestock and agricultural lands, but the efforts are insufficient. We seek to promote better efforts through national programs for the containment and prevention of dust and sandstorms in the framework of this international coalition of the United Nations to fight against sand and dust storms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mexico. Please, Saudi Arabia have the floor.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس إن المملكة العربية السعودية.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would like to support the efforts deployed by the Secretariat as regards the fight against sand and dust storms. They have devastating effects. We have adopted the idea of creating a specialized center for addressing the effects of such storms in the Arab world. This center will be able to identify the sources of the storms, remedy the effects, and study the effects on public health in order to attenuate the impacts thereof. We plan to continue our cooperation with the Secretariat of the Convention, and we have organized a seminar specifically aimed at addressing dust and sandstorms. That will be next month in Jeddah. Currently, we are host to one of these centers that is tasked with combating sand and dust storms. A UN body. Thank you very much.
Please, State of Palestine, have the floor.
رئيس بداية نتقدم بالشكر الجزيل.
Thank you, President. I would first like to thank the Secretariat of the Convention for having afforded us this opportunity to take the floor. I should like to thank as well the government of Cote d'Ivoire that has welcomed us so warmly. Sir, dust and sandstorms are a priority for our states. They have an effect on human life, on ecosystems, and on agricultural systems. They have effects, therefore, on life. The Middle East, sir, suffers from drought and sand and dust storms in general. These phenomena directly affect the inhabitants of our region. Thus, we must have technology transfer. There must be information exchange so that we can limit these storms. The State of Palestine has launched a plan for land restoration. The plan is aimed at combating these storms and increasing our forest surface area. This would allow for us to strengthen resiliency of our people and farmers in the areas most affected by drought.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Give us the floor again. In fact, we request a floor for both FAO and also the UN Coalition on Sand and Dust Storm that's chaired by FAO. I will deliver the statement of FAO, while my colleague, as the chair of this coalition, will deliver the statement of the coalition. So on behalf of FAO, now I'm delivering the statement. FAO believes and appreciates the ongoing collaboration on sand and dust storm issues with the UNCCD and the members of the UN Coalition on Combating Sand and Dust Storms. Sand and dust storms have major negative impacts on the health of people, environment, economies such as transport, tourism, agriculture, and food security, reducing the production of crops and livestock. On the other hand, agriculture is a major human-made driver of the sand and dust storms. SDS is causing major impacts, especially in countries with reduced capacity to absorb the shocks. FAO is implementing an interregional technical cooperation project, catalyzing investment and actions to enhance resilience against the sand and dust storms in agriculture. This project aims at strengthening evidence-based understanding of the SDS phenomena and its impacts on agriculture, and to identify the context-specific high-impact strategies and interventions. The project is implemented in Algeria, China, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Mongolia as catalytic first step for design a large-scale regional and international SDS program. FAO joined this coalition from the very beginning, has been chairing this coalition since July 2020, and is committed to continue fostering cooperation with UNCCD and other members of the UN coalition. FAO will also follow the 76th UN General Assembly's decision on this matter, and also continue to provide experience, methodologies, guidelines, and tools on combating SDS, including sustainable land, soil, water management, to protect the people's health, livelihood, and achieve food security. We strongly believe that only through international collaborations by all the parties and members and the partners of the coalition can we address this pressing transboundary and multi-sectoral issue of the sand and dust storms. Then my colleague will continue with the statement of the coalition.
Thank you. Thank you, Living. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is on behalf of the United Nations Coalition in Combating Sand and Dust Storms. Sand and dust storms, SDS, have major negative impacts on the health, environment, transport, agriculture, and food security, affecting 151 countries. The growing threat posed by sand and dust storms has triggered increasing global concern, and since 2015, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted yearly resolutions on combating sand and dust storms. As a result, the United Nations Coalition on Combating Sand and Dust Storms was launched in 2019 at the COP14 of UNCCD in Delhi, India. The coalition is presently chaired by FAO. The 5 working groups of the coalition address the many facets of this transboundary issue: adaptation and mitigation, forecasting and early warning, health and safety, policy and governance, mediation, and regional collaboration. The coalition fosters regional and interregional collaboration and global action to combat SDS that can help to achieve land degradation neutrality, delivering multiple environmental, economic, and social benefits. Recalling COP Decision 25, COP14, to address links between SDS and land degradation neutrality, the coalition has been developing a preliminary concept note for a new program, tentatively entitled as Combating Sand and Dust Storms to Enhance Food Security and Achieve Land Degradation Neutrality. This program builds on existing sand and dust storm-related outputs from FAO, UNCCD, ISCAP, UNDP, and WMO. At the 76th session on 2021, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the resolution on combating sand and dust storms, which requests the United Nations Secretary General to further encourage the United Nations Coalition in combating sand and dust storms to conduct its priority activity as identified by the coalition's 5 working groups, and to encourage the coalition to enhance resource mobilization efforts so as to increase voluntary contribution to the coalition and its member agencies. The coalition is ready to support parties toward enhancing the understanding of SDS process and impact, and to implement actions to help countries in combating SDS and reduce impact on different sectors. Global, regional, and interregional collaboration and actions are required in addition to mobilizing resources and strong commitment from countries and partners to counter the impact of SDS. The sand and dust storm phenomena will not disappear. However, together we can mitigate the source and reduce the impact of sand and dust storms on societies and economy and contribute to the achievement of sustainable development goals. The coalition is organizing the Sand and Dust Storm Day on Monday, 16th of May in the Rio Convention Pavilion. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Sr. Delegate. Please, civil society representative, have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, a warm greeting. My name is Pablo Mota. I am a representative of the Amazonian NGO, all 500 CSOs that are registered and accredited by the convention. Thank you for letting me take the floor. And speaking on behalf of my colleagues, I will offer the following. If given significant progress on sand and dust storms, we still see that only 30% of parties responded to the survey from the Secretariat. It was aimed at looking for gaps and priority when it comes to helping the parties to bring resiliency to their ecosystems and vulnerable populations. 87% of the surveyed countries identified themselves as being affected by sand and dust storms. We must underscore the effects of dust and sandstorms. They affect agricultural production, they affect ecosystems, but they also have an impact on human health. Dust particulate in the air brings serious risks for human health, and in particular for children. An evaluation of the global model in 2014 determined that exposure to dust particles brings around 400,000 premature deaths the world over. On a holistic approach, dust and sandstorms also should be addressed with a health-based approach, One Health. We believe that we must implement urgent measures to tackle the increasing degradation of land and the increase of intensity and frequency of dust and sandstorms. And we are pleased with the efforts made in forecasting, early warning, oversight, with the creation of a basic map for dust and sandstorms. This should be updated with information provided by the parties in order to hone its efficacy. Mitigation mechanisms are necessary on different scales. We must underscore the need to continue with research and data collection in the field. Here, we must bear in mind the experience of civil society, women's organizations, youth groups, indigenous and local groups, as well as pastoral communities. This is to have reliable information that can be fed into the prediction models, and this can increase the margin of success in forecasts. It can also inform decision-making when it comes to impact mitigation in the event of sand and dust storms. We also urge parties that they prioritize those practices that have an environmentally friendly focus, including regenerative agriculture and livestock. The idea is to increase the resiliency of the affected ecosystems and reduce the possible impact on human health that comes with land degradation and the effects of sand and dust storms. We should recall also that the open dialogue session will afford us an opportunity to speak together. We encourage you to attend the next open dialogue session. We will be looking at environmentally friendly solutions that arise in regenerative agriculture and livestock. Thank you.
I thank you all for your statements. There are no more speakers on my list under these issues. I now invite the committee to turn its attention to the issue of land tenure. The committee have before its document ICCD/COP15/19 and ICCD/COP15/21. I now give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat to introduce the document ICCD/COP15/19. Mr. Emicalio, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates. Document ICCD COP15/19 provides a summary of the actions taken by the Secretariat in response to Decision 26 COP14 on land tenure. It also provides conclusions and recommendations for integrating responsible governance of tenure into the implementation of the Convention through policy, awareness raising, and data and knowledge exchange. In 2019, at the 14th Conference of the Parties, COP14, the parties adopted a landmark decision on land tenure. To date, the UNCCD stands as the only multilateral environmental agreement to explicitly address the issue of land tenure. In response to the requests contained in the Decision 26, COP14, the Secretariat would like to highlight the following. On policy guidance, the Secretariat collaborated with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, and other partners to produce a technical guide on how to integrate the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of national food security. In short, the VGGT. Into the implementation of the Convention and the achievement of LDN. The technical guide builds on a series of consultations with parties and other UNCCD stakeholders. It outlines practical applications of the VGGT in the design and implementation of LDN initiatives, taking into account national contexts. It describes 9 flexible and voluntary pathways to support decision makers and other stakeholders to address commonly encountered land tenure challenges, including through national plans, legal frameworks, strategies, and action programs to avoid, reduce, and reverse land degradation. On awareness raising, the Secretariat, in collaboration with partners and experts, has produced an options paper for raising awareness on responsible land governance for combating desertification, land degradation, and drought. The paper offers a range of awareness-raising options, key messages, and tools that can be tailored to different stakeholders and their capacities and target audience. The paper utilizes a gender-equitable and socially inclusive approach to raise awareness and to promote efforts for equitable representation and meaningful participation of vulnerable populations, including women, Indigenous peoples and local communities, youth, pastoralists, migrants, and persons with disabilities. On reporting, the Secretariat commissioned a study to explore options for the integration of existing globally agreed Sustainable Development Goal indicators relevant to land governance into the implementation into the UNCCD reporting process with a view to avoiding the duplication of reporting efforts and ensuring the widest reach among different national contexts. The study found that the current data availability for the above indicators is limited and that it was not feasible to integrate them into the UNCCD reporting process at this time. The Secretariat will continue to monitor the availability of data for reporting and will inform the CRIC Bureau on developments. Document ICCD COP15/19 contains summaries of the technical guide and the awareness-raising options paper, which are also available in full on the UNCCD website and UNCCD COP15 conference app. These publications and activities provide a strong foundation and potential guidance for the future work of the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism to assist parties with the integration of secure land tenure into the implementation of the Convention and achieving LDN. This includes capacity building, awareness raising, technical assistance, resource mobilization, gathering of relevant data, and knowledge exchange. Mainstreaming activities to improve tenure security in land-related investment decisions holds great promise for both people and the planet, particularly for improving the living conditions of the most vulnerable. Draft elements for a decision on land tenure are contained in document ICCD COP15/21 for the consideration of the parties. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Calio, for your statement. I now open the floor for any statement in connection with the report that was just introduced. Speakers are requested to keep statement brief and consist to that I can give the floor to as many speakers as possible. I will take all comments and then give the floor to the Secretariat to respond. Please, Dominican Republic, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor on an important matter such as land tenure. The Dominican Republic would like to underscore the importance of land tenure in the sustainable land management and soils and forests and water in particular. Likewise, we would like to commend and support the guidelines created by the Secretariat on land tenure. We think that land tenure is essential. When looked at together with the other items, gender, youth, land tenure is an important inclusion. We very much appreciate the work and the guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ghana, please have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This statement is being made on behalf of the African Regional Group. Mr. Chairman, I would like to take this opportunity to express our profound appreciation to the government and good people of the Ivory Coast for the warm hospitality extended to us since our arrival here in this beautiful city of Abidjan. Mr. Chairman, I must say that this journey started from India, where the African group endorse the conclusions and recommendations presented by the UNCCD in document ICCD/COP14/20 regarding land tenure, security, and land governance, which was reviewed by the African Group in New Delhi. Mr. Chairman, in addressing some of the technical assistance needs as endorsed and elaborated in documents ICCD/COP14/20, the technical guide on the integration of the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of national food security, that's VGGT, into the implementation of the United Nations Convention to Combat Deforestation and Land Degradation. I must say that document has been launched in May 11th, 2022, here in Abidjan. We further endorse the conclusions and recommendations presented by the UNCCD in document ICCD/COP15/19. The UNCCD Secretariat, FAO, and other stakeholders deserve special praise for their collaboration on the development of the technical guide as was requested by the parties. The technical guide, now duly launched, will help to outline the practical application of the VGGT in the context of design and implementation of DLDD and LDN initiatives. It offers flexible pathway approach to support policy, legal frameworks, strategies, and action programs addressing DLDD. Mr. Chairman, outstanding issues needing addressing are further capacity building and awareness raising to mobilize proposed concrete actions needed in the guideline document. Discussion on concerted efforts on the investment into the integration efforts, the entrenching of established partnerships, gathering of relevant data. Mr. Chairman, attracting the right funding from public and private investors to implement VGGT guidelines is key for Africa in terms of assessment of environmental and social risks involved in the implementation and achievement of the LDN and its integration efforts. Finally, we wish to state that Africa should be assisted with the specific tools and strategies which are needed in the integration of land tenure into LDN initiatives. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for...
Thank you, Ghana. Please, Argentina, have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for this valuable document on land tenure. We must remember that this was incorporated in the second intersessional meeting after the COP13 in 2019, and a new item was approved for the agenda on land tenure. The FAO was asked to undertake a process of cooperation with the UNHCR and the voluntary guidelines, because there must be governance in land tenure. But this also involved fishing and forests in the area of food security to ensure that there would be work on land degradation as it relates to these items. We would very much like to commend you for this document and for the technical and scientific work, and also for the policy analysis that resulted from the conclusions. We would like to recommend that the technical guidelines stress in a more concrete manner the role played by the land tenure system. In different models, we see repercussions that are not positive in the land degradation process, and in particular as regards the deterioration of the quality of life of the rural communities. We would like to underscore the intrinsic vulnerability in some land tenure systems when we see lands abandoned from migration, leading to greater land degradation. This has been addressed during these days of negotiation and exchange. We must undertake an effort to address all regions. And the new technical guidelines that have been proposed by the technical team, and in particular for the Republic of Argentina, my country, with more than 2,800,000 square kilometers, in which 40% of our land is dry land. 60% of land has suffered land degradation. 81.5% has seen concrete land degradation affecting populations living in those areas. Their food security has been undermined. We see this throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. Argentina is a member of a geographical, cultural, and spiritual region. And there are similar circumstances and realities. Other cases for land tenure and gender issues can look at different representative ecosystems in the region, the Andean regions, the Patagonian steppe, the mangroves, among other areas. Turning back to the Republic of Argentina, in Guideline 1, we have worked hard to generate norms and standards for regulations in land tenure. We have strengthened concrete policies to include women in the process for empowerment and identity in their regions. This to bring about a sustainable system for land management. Women, children, indigenous communities, rural communities, their inclusion is important. Through our Sustainable Development Environmental Ministry, we have a project underway. It would be good to share that with you right now. It is the Territorial Land Management Program. It seeks to look at natural resources, available natural resources, economic needs, social needs, and rules, laws, and regulations. Bringing these together, we can look at alternatives for avoiding terrible land degradation. The different concepts of land tenure must include social justice, environmental justice, and a gender-based approach in all of our projects. We would suggest that there be a more focused attention paid to financing, particularly in the context of this convention. Technology transfer, financial support for the affected countries are still not enough. Being objective, we must note that they are precarious, they're not continuous, and this is a challenge when we look at the measures that we need to move ahead. This is an important component of sustainable land management. Addressing this will help to bring about land degradation neutrality. That's what we suggest, bearing in mind that UN bodies and international organizations, when they address the issue of sustainable land management and sustainable land stewardship, have proven to be very important. We must have the self-esteem and an aspiration to move ahead with these goals. These are common goals. As regards priorities and mandates in our convention, there are matters that we must focus on further, the outstanding matters. We must have effective implementation measures that will allow for this convention to be effective. There are national implementation measures as well that implement the convention on the ground. There are excellent pillars and starting points that we see in this document. They will help us to address the outstanding work that we have to accomplish. In the document, there are phrases, words that are not common to the language of the convention. It would be a good idea to harmonize and optimize this COP15 for a closer analysis by experts of these items. Again, our congratulations for this fine work and our strong desire that we achieve our goals.
Please, Kenya, have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It is our first time to take the floor. Therefore, allow me, on behalf of Kenya, to express and appreciate the hospitality accorded to the Kenyan delegation by the country and the people of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire, and we truly appreciate the hospitality. We also want to express our gratitude to the UNCCD Secretariat for organizing this conference. Further, we have special mention for the FAO for the development and launching of the technical guides that are going to give us how we are going to proceed. From the onset, Kenya aligns with a statement made by Ghana on behalf of Africa and further reiterates that to accelerate responsible land governance, Kenya looks forward to further interrogating the guidelines in view of mainstreaming it into our policies and strategies, and to assist in handling the very complex yet significant issue of land tenure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. Please, in your opinion, have the floor.
Dear Mr. President, thank you very much for giving us the floor again, which also reflects, the very close collaboration between FAO and the.
Excuse me, please. In your opinion, have the floor, please. Change to the order, please.
Yes. Monsieur le Président.
President, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, I'm going to make a statement on the land tenure regimes on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Allow me to start by expressing that the European Union and its member states reaffirm the central role of the land tenure regime in terms of the fight against land degradation, drought, and desertification, as well as land neutrality in terms of land degradation. The EU and its member states remain convinced that if we do not tackle the obstacles to the implementation of this neutrality, of which land tenure rules are a central element, there will be no progress in the fight against the degradation of land, desertification, and drought. Despite all of the decisions and recommendations that have been undertaken, we must bear in mind that we cannot implement and tackle in a successful way issues of desertification without forging peace. The era in which we live reminds us of the consequence and impact of conflicts on the environment and the well-being of our populations. As we said, our thoughts are with those individuals who are facing conflict in Ukraine and other parts of the world. The war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the upheaval resulting from them in the economic systems of the world have impacted food security in a great many countries around the world. This underscores and increases the importance of land tenure rules in terms of the context of small farms and small farmers. The EU and its member states welcome the work carried out by the Secretariat of the Convention to provide follow-up to the historic decision of COP14 on land tenure regimes. The EU and its member states welcome the fact that the Secretariat has set up
a working group on awareness raising for land tenure rights. We stress the need to set up a set of measures to protect land tenure rights over and beyond awareness. We welcome the study which was carried out on the issue of indicators in terms of land tenure rights management within the framework of the Convention, and we firmly back continued exploration of existing global indicators, as well as all and any data in terms of land tenure rights in the future processes for drawing up these reports. Ladies and gentlemen, the European Union and its member states especially welcome the technical manual of the FAO on incorporating the voluntary guidelines into land tenure rules and laws applicable to fisheries and forestries in terms of global international food security within the framework of the Convention, as well as the objective of land degradation neutrality. In this, we see a solid foundation for our future work, both the work of the Secretariat as well as the global mechanism, and indeed the work of the parties. The advice it provides to decision makers in terms of integrating voluntary decisions in their activity have been backed by irrefutable evidence. We recognize that the 9 points which have been identified, which are aimed at action, are flexible and can be adapted to all contexts and all specificities in all countries. We encourage countries to look to this manual to implement the provisions of the Convention. The EU and its member states take note with satisfaction of the efforts and progress achieved by certain of the parties in terms of the implementation of Decision 26/14 by collecting and analyzing data on the land occupancy right within the framework of national plans to fight against desertification. We encourage the parties who have not done so yet to review their activities and plans to ensure that they are sound or to align them on the principle of voluntary guidelines. Thank you.
Have the floor, please.
Gracias.
Thank you for giving us the floor. Mexico supports and commends the work of the Secretariat on land tenure and its inclusion in this agenda item, as well as the decisions made thereon. Our country has solid institutions to regularize land tenure and the productive uses thereof. This affords the owners certitude when it comes to being more productive, when it comes to having access to credit loans and financing, and when it comes to making these lands more productive. We are willing to make our experience available to other parties. Mexico believes that we must foster a regional and sub-regional and global study on the problems and possible solutions that affect landowners. This includes land hoarding, high rents, and expulsions of rural communities and ethnic groups that are the least protected. With the gradual aging of the rural population and the migration of the youth to the cities and scarce loans and vulnerable groups, we see a crossover of issues addressed by different conventions, including in our convention. We have already mentioned this. There must be guarantees for women when it comes to land ownership and land titles. We would like to kindly ask for this to be reflected in the working documents.
Oh, please, Switzerland, have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Switzerland is and has been a long-standing advocate of the respect, protection, and fulfillment of the human rights. In the context of the UNCCD and in Rome, we have been very active in the development of the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests, which has been developed under the Committee of the World Food Security. And of course, we have been fully engaged in the work done since over the last 10 years. In this, Switzerland highly commends the work done resulting in the technical guideline, and we wish to express our appreciation and gratitude to the UNCCD Secretariat and the FAO. We stand by the recommendations which have resulted and encourage the UNCCD, the parties, and all the cooperating bodies to now turn efforts towards the implementation of these at national and local levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Nepal, have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for providing time to Nepal. Respected Chair,
distinguished delegates and participants. In Nepal, we have only 20% of agricultural land and residential area registered and have direct tenurial rights to the landowner. Management of forests, rangelands, and wetlands by more than 25,000 user groups are the most successful model that we have in land tenurial case. Government has provided significant concession for women to get land ownership rights. Women pay significantly low land transfer tax and get other benefits while getting benefits from the government. In Nepal, citizens who have very limited land can unite in groups to get forest on land, especially the degraded land they have managed, turn into good patches and forest and agroforestry models. These programs have significantly contributed for incomes and livelihood of these poor farmers. Nepal has a firm belief and trust upon the citizens that they are the best managers of the lands, especially women and indigenous people who are using and managing their lands since long ago. Nepal appreciates the guidelines developed by UNCCD with collaboration with the FAO and affirms its policy plan and programs will be make more appropriate for controlling degradation and enhancement of land restoration for all land use types, providing tenurial rights to the women, indigenous people, and poor with highest priority. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Please, Madagascar, have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. We'd like to also associate ourselves with the words of congratulations extended to all of the teams who have prepared this event. And of course, we welcome the Secretariat's solutions when it comes to the management of land tenure rights. Yes, Madagascar is not spared by land deterioration and degradation, and this lies at the very heart of the problem, both at international and national levels. Now, tools for land management are available at the national level, but we have to step up our implementation of land degradation neutrality. This situation, which is a pressing one, especially in Madagascar, with the impact of climate change, which exacerbates the loss of productive lands, is quite serious. We therefore want a national inventory of land degradation neutrality to be drawn up, and we want it to be participative and inclusive to ensure that the needs of vulnerable communities are not ignored when it comes to land degradation neutrality efforts. In addition to this, we would like to bolster financing provided to vulnerable states such as Madagascar, especially when it comes to the implementation of good practices and the implementation of the Good Practices Manual elaborated by the FAO, which is an indispensable tool for the sound implementation of the Convention, as well as the sustainable management of lands and restoration of landscapes. And finally, we also back the organization of regional meetings to share experiences and to therefore draw the lessons from experiences at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, FAO, have the floor.
Dear Mr. President, thank you very much for giving me the floor again. I misunderstood that I had the floor when my microphone was flashing in red. I sincerely apologize for that, and we fully respect your chairship and also the rules and procedures of this conference. On behalf of FAO, I'm delivering the following statement on this agenda item. FAO welcomes the document ICCD/COP15/19 and the related decisions in the document ICCD COP15/21 and appreciates the collaboration with the UNCCD Secretariat and all the partners on this matter. FAO takes note of the renewed encouragement to the parties to integrate the VGT into the implementation of the Convention and to take into consideration the pathways presented in the technical guide into the future LDN initiatives. FAO would like to highlight the joint FAO and WCAT effort to develop a standardized module on tenure for the WCAT database to allow all stakeholders to improve knowledge and exchange of lessons learned on the integration of the VGGT into UNCCT implementation. Acknowledging the technical guide on how to integrate the VGGT into UNCCT implementation on LDN is just a first step. FAO stands ready to support UNCCT, the global mechanism, to further assist the parties on the ways and means to integrate the VGGT into their target plans and programs on desertification and land degradation and drought. FAO can mobilize the wealth of tools, methodologies, and approaches developed under the VGGT implementation programs led by FAO with multiple partners at the global, national, and local levels, and bring them and adapt them with the UNCCT, the global mechanism, and the parties to respond to their needs of raising awareness, capacity building, lessons learned, and formulation and implementation of their LDN initiatives or transformative projects and programs in the future. FAO is willing to bring its experience and know-how to support this integration of the VGGT into LDN initiatives with the robust social and environmental safeguards and the inclusion of all stakeholders, and in particular the most vulnerable as women, indigenous people, youth, local communities, and the populations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Please, civil society representative, have the floor.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues. My name is Nathalie van Haren from both ends, a CSO from the Netherlands. As a CSO community, we are pleased to take the floor during the CAO session on land tenure. Land tenure is a topic that is very close to the hearts of civil society organizations, as we believe that without a legitimate and secured land tenure, particularly for women, small-scale farmers, pastoralists, indigenous peoples, local communities, it will not be possible to halt land degradation and to achieve the LDN targets. In this context, we welcome the joint work of FAO and UNCCD on the preparation of the technical guide on the responsible governance of tenure and land degradation neutrality. We value the fact that the technical guide adopts 3 key considerations to be followed by the countries for the design and implementation of all LDN initiatives, including legitimate tenure rights, consultation and participation, and gender-responsive approaches. The work represents a very important step forward in the implementation of the groundbreaking decision on land tenure adopted by the parties in COP14. However, a lot more has to be done in order to make the knowledge in this guide available and accessible for national policymakers and local communities, and for implementing the suggested pathways in the different national and local contexts. For addressing these challenges, we would like to propose the parties to consider the following 7 recommendations in the COP15 decision on land tenure. 1. To strongly encourage national governments and UNCCD national focal points to commit to raise awareness on land tenure issues and the technical guide at national and subnational level by working under an intersectoral approach and engaging civil society in the process. 2. To request UNCCD Secretariat, the global mechanism, FAO and donors to support making the technical guide more meaningful and pragmatic for every national context and challenges through capacity development, participatory workshops and widespread dissemination activities. 3. To strongly encourage facilitating the translation of the technical guide into local languages. 4. To promote the inclusion of the technical guide's pathways into the national policy framework. 5. To find the synergies and overlaps related to land tenure in the different UNCCD tools and initiatives, such as the Land Degradation Neutrality Program, the Gender Action Plan, the roadmap, the drought initiative, the drought toolbox, and especially the work of science policy interface in order to increase efficiency and ensure coherence. 6, to replace the term vulnerable people, vulnerable communities to people in situation of vulnerability in the future UNCCD official document related to land tenure, and to unpack who are these people who are most vulnerable and what is happening to them in case of land tenure insecurity. For this purpose, add scientists on gender, indigenous people and local communities to the UNCCD SPI. And 7, to encourage financial institutions like JEF, GCF and IFAD, philanthropies and donor countries to engage with civil society organizations to support women, youth and indigenous peoples and local communities for its meaningful participation in the design and implementation of land tenure security strategies, including the implementation of the technical guide. And finally, we would like to thank all the delegates who attended the open dialogue session yesterday. That is part of the official agenda of the convention. It was a pity that not more delegates were able to participate. We therefore would like to give you a save the date that you can pencil in your agendas for the following. The CSOs present here at COP15 invite you cordially to attend the next open dialogue session that will take place on Tuesday, 17th of May. We are committed to develop a vibrant dialogue on agroecological approaches and regenerative practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for your statements. And now I'll give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat to respond to the questions and comments from the floor. Mr. Cario, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat appreciates and wishes to thank all the parties and the civil society organizations for their positive reception of the technical guide and the awareness-raising options paper. We also wish to thank FAO for the collaboration in developing the technical guide. We have taken note of all the interventions made for further discussion. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Calio for her statement. We have just heard the last speaker on the list and have thus conclude the general discussion of the agenda item 4 as a whole. I propose that further discussion on this. Yes. Please, China, have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one point of concern. The paragraph on financing in the resolution, after developed countries who have seen the phrase of other countries in a position to do so, well, such a phrase tends to confuse the difference between developing countries and developed countries when it comes to financing, and will have a negative impact on other conventions. We'd like to see it deleted. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, China. I would like to remind the committee that, as per usual practice, any further writing amendments proposed by the parties to a special draft decision should be considered by the respective COP contact group. We have thus conclude the general discussion of agenda item 4 as a whole. I propose that further discussion of these items in their totality be taken up in COP contact group 2 on other matters. Hearing no option, it is so decided. The next meeting of the COP is scheduled Monday, 16 May, starting 3 p.m. Please consult the Daily Journal for further details. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.